Hey, welcome back to the table. My name is Taylor. I'm sitting across Caleb.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Ever since we recorded, I guess it's been 2 weeks today,
Yeah.
I started lifting again.
Okay.
I've been doing like a higher protein thing. Thank you for noticing. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's been fun.
Buff Daddy Taylor.
You'll search that. But Aaron and I, we've been going to the gym, and that's been kind of fun just to hang out with him and kind of learn some new things in the gym. And it's been fun.
Has he taught you how to take a charge yet, or?
I mean,
he doesn't.
You can't teach what you don't know. So
I love it.
Yeah. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. Recovering.
Resting?
I've been not doing the gym thing. I'm doing the opposite of that right now. I'm not supposed to lift anything heavy. Actually, I think I'm probably past that now. I'm mostly just dealing with bruising and soreness and that kind of a thing. But doing good. They're getting drywall done at my house this week. So next week we'll be hitting the ground running, getting the painting done and trim and flooring and all the fun interior things, electrical. I'm super pumped about it.
What I'm pumped about is that you said that you were able to kind of relax your mind.
Yeah. It's interesting. Sometimes you don't realize just how much your mind is carrying and until you have a forced hiatus,
Yep.
It's like you make me to lie down in green pastures kind of a thing. Until you're made to lie down, sometimes you don't realize what all is in there. And I was thinking so much about the house and everything else that I was having literal dreams about electrical work and stuff like that, because, just thinking about it and mind processing and all that. And once I had the surgery and then had to basically be couch ridden for 3 days. My brain was like, okay, I'm going to chill now. Yeah. And because I couldn't think about going and doing anything at the house. So I actually ended up watching all 5 Jason Bourne movies, which was fun. I enjoyed that. And got to just really kind of shut my mind off and recuperate. And it was good. It was, physically it was helpful, but then also, emotionally, soulfully, it was nice as well. So
I love that.
Yeah. So it was like my mind defragmented, like when you defrag a computer for, quicker access and whatnot. That's how it felt. It was refreshing. That was refreshing. Awesome. Yeah.
Speaking of refreshing, I'm like craving a trip to like the mountains or something like that. Like craving a trip to like Tennessee or something like that. Not like a Pigeon Forge thing, or I went like nobody around that, but like in the woods cabin kind of thing. So today we're going to talk about encounters versus arguing about things. So our appetizer today is, what is the best trip you've ever been on? And how would you kind of define, like, why was it so good?
Yeah. So for me, I have a couple of different trips that I really have loved and have been really great trips, like with family and whatnot. But for me, like maybe a most memorable trip was when I went to Alaska. And I went by myself. Like I didn't go. I met people there. It was when I was touring in the band. But it was my first flight by myself.
Okay.
And so that was obviously very memorable for me. Yeah. And it was interesting. We flew out of Louisville and into Philadelphia. I did into Philadelphia, and then from Philadelphia all the way to Anchorage, Alaska, which was a long flight.
How long was that?
It was like 9 or 10 hours. And so that was an entire experience. And then we went king salmon fishing whenever we were there. Of course, we played the show. Got to go stand on a glacier, which was really cool. We went kind of hiking through the woods, and they gave us guns because they're like, you're gonna want these. So it was all in all, man. It was just a really beautiful experience because we're driving in. So we flew into Anchorage, and we had to drive to Nikiski, which I think they said was like 4 hours. I can't remember now, but it was a few hour drive. And as we're driving down the highway, like on my left, I could just see it was just all evergreen forest. Like it was super, just scenic and beautiful. And then on my right, there was like this glacial bay with a mountain, like a snow-capped mountain. And it was just like, it was, something that you would see in a movie or a book or whatever. And it was just like being there was such an experience. And I took pictures and everything, but the pictures do not do it justice. The same whenever I went out to to Colorado, like the sky is just bluer. But you have to experience it. You can't see it in the like. There's not. Right. It's not a good representation in the pictures. But when you get out there and you experience it, you experience the vastness of it. You experience the majesty of it, and I'm just like, this is breathtaking. So cool. Like it was really amazing. Yeah. I would, if you ever get a chance to go to Alaska, we went in like, I think it was June or July. So it was summertime. So it was daylight forever. And so much so that we ended up going to the midnight showing of Pirates of the Caribbean. Got out at like 3 a.m. and it was still light outside.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, it tripped my brain out because I'm like, let's go do stuff, and I'm like, wait, you got to go to bed, bro. Right. It was man, but it was awesome. So if you ever get a chance to go to Alaska, you need to check that out.
Do that. Yeah.
What about you? What's been one of your favorite trips?
I think one of our favorite trips has been, we've been to a lot of places. Kate and I, we like to travel. Yeah. So like we've been to Mexico. That was our honeymoon. We've been to Paris. We've been to Chicago. We've been to a slew of other places. But I think one of our favorite trips was, St. Louis. That's the name of it. Yeah, so weird. So what we did was, what was so cool was that we did a pack up and go trip.
Yeah.
And usually Caitlin's like, she does really well planning out trips. Sure. She was able to cram a full tour of Paris within 3 days. Like she knows how to do that kind of stuff. Pack up and go was pretty cool because they plan the trip for you. Yeah. And they tell you the cool stops, the places to go, places not to go, what restaurants to go to, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't just the city, because I had been to St. Louis before. Kate and I actually went there before on the way to go to visit college. But what was cool about this one was that the pressure was like lifted, and we were able just to go to the reservations that someone else booked. We were, it was, well, I guess luxury, but also, it was just kind of cool to be in a space that I had been in before, but see new things, and then also just kind of walk through someone else's plan. Yeah. So, nice. We did the normal arch thing, and then we went to a restaurant that we would not have been to. We had Emo's Pizza, which is like sometimes I consider ordering a frozen one because I loved it so much. But I would say St. Louis.
I've been to St. Louis several times. Mm-hmm. Because Marley went to college out there in St. Charles, which was about 20 minutes past St. Louis, and so every few weeks I was out there as well. So it's cool. They got some cool stuff there. Yeah, sure. Well, awesome. Yeah. So today, you and I were in the car yesterday. We had contemplated recording a podcast in the car on the way down, and we were in the car for a couple hours, and but ultimately decided against it. We were just chatting. But one of the things that we were talking about was, and I told you, just to have this thing that God's really been highlighting in my spirit of encounter versus argument. Mm-hmm. And as we transition into our entree today, just having a discussion on encounter versus argument, and how, and this was kind of what we talked about a little bit, like to start yesterday, was I feel as if right now in our culture, in America especially, there's a significant emphasis placed on argument. Like it's like people are just wanting to fight, with everything that goes on politically, everything that's going on with the trans stuff right now, with the gun stuff right now, and then even into church realm stuff. It's like people just want to argue and want to fight, and it's almost argument for argument's sake, and not like trying to win you over to my side. Right. It's, you bring up a point and then I just crush you for it. It's, I'm not even looking to win your heart or win your mind. Like, it's literally just like, you're an idiot, and you just go off into this, whole spiel of why you're so stupid and why I'm right, and there's no place for any kind of conversation. But it's just like people just wanting to fight. Yeah. And argue. And I thought about that in the context of life with Christ, and how sometimes people can be quick to take that same mentality, which to me, I look at as more of a worldly mentality, and to take that and to apply it in their Christian walk. and to think that for some way, like I'm going to fight for Jesus in this, like I'm going to fight to argue to you my faith.
Yeah.
And for me, I grew up with the major push into apologetics.
Right.
Did you get that whenever you were a kid? Like, was that, or was it kind of maybe past that a little bit?
Maybe so. And I think maybe it depends on the culture that you were in. For me growing up, there was a lot of, we fought against like Harry Potter and that kind of thing, but it was more about the way you lived, like we don't watch that, or, another big emphasis was, like end times also, especially with the youth group. Like that was one of the big things that we talked about. And, you'd look at news articles and see the time's coming soon. Look, there's earthquake, there's tsunamis, there's all this destruction coming along. But as far as apologetics goes and knowing how to actually argue for the faith, we didn't talk about that a whole lot. Although I do remember, I was homeschooled from 4th to 8th grade.
Yeah.
And, towards the end, we started going to this thing called, whatever, doesn't matter. We went to this homeschool group, and one of the activities was we went to this church, and it was this scientist, and he would talk about why creation was the answer, and not evolution and all those other things. Yeah. And there's this attractiveness to being able to prove someone else wrong and say, yeah, Jesus is right.
Right.
So I can definitely see the surety and, wanting to have that concrete, I guess, information, but it's not something that it's never landed with me.
Yeah.
Well, it was never something I really wanted to dig into. And I remember one of those. I
remember feeling like you remember how Disney really made us feel like quicksand was going to be a big deal later on in life. Like I remember being so afraid of quicksand. Like I got to be careful that I don't fall into quicksand.
Right.
I felt the same way when it came to apologetics, like that it was, and I'm not saying that this was the emphasis necessarily, but this is just how it felt to me, like how I received it. I felt like it was going to be a bigger deal, that I was going to have to argue my faith. The whole Columbine shooting, pull the trigger, are you a Christian? Like that whole thing, that was really heavily emphasized. The Book of Martyrs, those types of things, those were really heavily emphasized. And it's, are you willing to stand up for your faith? Are you willing to, are you able to argue your faith when people question you in this, that, and the other? And I just felt like it was going to be a much bigger deal than it ended up being. And I want you to hear me too today. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to give account for your faith, to be able to give good response, like Paul says, for and to be accountable to that, and to study to show yourself approved among men. I'm not saying don't do those things. But what I'm saying is that as a young person, especially, like there was just such a heavy emphasis in my heart about this, that it was like, you're going to face this so much. And I'm thinking, I really never did. I never faced heavy persecution in that sense. Most people were pretty chill. They're like, oh yeah, he's a Christian. And they leave you alone. Like they're not looking for the argument. Yeah. A lot of the arguments came from the Christian side. It's like, I'm pursuing the argument to argue you to Jesus. Like I'm going to argue my faith to you. And that to me, looking at it now, I look at it and I think, man, it's an interesting perspective to bring, because, and this is my thought on this, like if I can argue my faith to you, I feel like I can also, like if I can argue you to Jesus, you could also be argued away from him.
For sure.
Because all I'm doing is going after your mind or your intellect in this. And God always navigates toward the heart, which is why for me, I look at it more from the encounter perspective of, when you encounter me, I want you to encounter Jesus.
For sure.
When you encounter me, I don't want you to encounter an argument. Although I'm willing to stand for my faith and say, this is why I believe what I believe. This is what I've seen. This is what I've experienced. And, for some that it's not going to be an argument, because I think of an argument like fighting back and forth.
Right.
Even though that's not necessarily the exact terminology for it. I'm giving my case for it. Right.
Right.
But when you encounter me, I want you to encounter Jesus, so that there's a transformation that's made on the heart level, not just the head level.
Right. I'm just thinking about Jesus in this too, because the Pharisees were one that definitely wanted to start arguments.
Yeah.
They were asking prodding questions and trying to corner him in. Like, on topics like divorce and topics like Sabbath and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And Jesus, a lot of the times he wouldn't answer them directly, but he would give them something to think about, or he'd ask a question. And again, it was more to gain their hearts, and I mean, that's where we want to be. And I think the end goal is the same for the people that are apologists and, those kind of people, but not those kind of people, but I think the goal can be the same. It's just, I don't know. I'm not convinced that that's the way I should be.
Sure, and that's
leading people to Jesus.
And this is not a bashing of people who are apologists. Like, I super appreciate those people actually that are the heavy, deep theologians and that kind of type as well. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is, what is not maybe necessarily a good thing is adopting a mentality that I've got to argue Jesus throughout my life in order for me to live a Christian lifestyle.
Yeah.
And to me, it's not the argument that is what's important, because Jesus was really good about, two things, very, very good at two things. One, he was really good at being able to pinpoint the location of people's hearts, right? He knew what the Pharisees, he knew where their hearts were. Like, I'm trying to trick you up here. Or trip you up here. I'm trying to trick you. I'm trying to deceive you. He knew what the goal was, like what their aim was. But then he was also really good at being able to elevate the conversation. Raise the conversation. Like, I'm going to answer this question by not answering your question, but rather getting you to think about the greater principle here and what's going on, and really address what's actually going on in your heart. And I think that those two things, one of my prayers has been from the book of Isaiah, which was prophesying about Jesus, about the Messiah, that he would be able to sustain the weary with a word.
Yeah.
That as people are encountering me, that those who are coming, who are weary and who need hope, who need that restoration, the joy, whatever it may be, that through my speech and interaction, that they would be able to encounter that, right? And to me, that's not an argument. It is a case for Jesus, for Christ, and that, but it's not an argument in that. And I think that it is important that people are won over through their minds. Because you change, that's what metanoia is, right? Like you're changing your mind and how you think about all this. Because once you change your mind, God's going to change your heart, right? But I think that it can be done not from an argumentative standpoint. Rather, it can be done from a case of encounter Jesus through my speech. Paul talks about, let it be gracious and let it be, salty, let it be good speech, right? Yes. Gracious speech, that in this and in everything, be thankful, be gentle, so that as you're encountering me, as I was growing up, my mom would always say this, that a soft answer turns away wrath. And so, when I feel like I want to get into an argument with you about Jesus or about my faith, if I can stay from the place of the soft answer and have a conversation that way, then we can actually have a conversation that's not filled with wrath and vitriol toward one another.
Right.
And we may disagree.
Totally.
And that might happen.
Right.
And sometimes that does.
Right. And in those conversations that I do enter into, like if there's a disagreement or something like that, and if it leads to me trying to argue you into my perspective, at the end of at the end of that kind of conversation, my heart's always disheartened.
Yeah.
It's always kind of downcast. And I think that's because the desires of the Father are in us. We want them to see Jesus.
Yeah. And
sometimes we see that maybe there's a lack. So I think we try to go into arguing people over in our own strength.
Yeah.
I was doing a small study on sin, and it was about, I will remember. So it was about basically it being self-empowered and not God-empowered. There's some areas in our life where, especially for me, that I try to do things out of my own strength and out of my own origin.
Yeah.
And that's not our origin. That's not the beginning or the end. It's not us.
Right.
It's him. So if I'm trying to do God-like things out of my own strength, it's not going to hit.
Yeah.
It's going to miss the mark.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do God-like. So if we partner with the Lord in his own strength and the ways that he does things, because I believe that God is using apologists as well to win people over that.
Absolutely.
That's the way God designed them.
Oh, absolutely.
Was, to be mind forward.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think this is like definitely a heart issue that we're kind of talking about.
Yeah.
That I'm going to win you over in my own vigor, in my own knowledge, in my own.
And what I think about too is that if we adopt the mentality that I'm going to win you over, then we've already lost. Because it's the Holy Spirit that draws hearts, and it's as we lift up Jesus, He's the one that draws men to Himself. And so, if I approach it instead of the mentality of like I'm going to win you over to Jesus versus I'm going to exalt Jesus here, then that changes the game. Like that changes the platform, because I never lose when I exalt Jesus.
That's right.
I never lose that way.
Nope.
Even if you walk away, I still never lose because Jesus is glorified and Jesus is exalted.
Right.
And so there's never loss here, right? You might walk away sad, just like the rich young ruler did whenever he was told, hey, this is what you get to do. Come follow me. Yep. You may walk away sad, and you may have to reconcile your emotions and your thoughts, in your own time. But that seed has now been sown as well. And Jesus didn't lose there, right? He doesn't lose, right? And so I think for me, like that, adopting that kind of a mentality as I'm encountering people, then shifts how I interact with them.
Right.
Because if I interact with them from the perspective of I've got to win you over, then it's like it's me versus you.
Right.
And in that, like I'm trying to be right, and just because you're trying to be right does not make you righteous.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Righteousness brings us both into right standing.
Yes.
But right just makes me right and you wrong.
Right.
And that's not okay.
No.
And so, that's not Jesus, and that's not His righteousness.
I'm almost hearing like an undue pressure in this. Like I'm winning you over. Like the Lord has entrusted me with this huge responsibility to win you over.
Right.
That's not it.
Right.
Just shine. Be the child of light that you are.
Yeah.
And you will do that.
Well, and if you think about it from these terms, I get to share with you the good news. Mm-hmm. Like I am. There's no argument with the news. You might disagree with the news. You might not like what it has to say. You might not, but there's not an argument of the news. It's the news proclaiming this is what has happened.
That's right.
And that's what we are entrusted with, is the news of reconciliation. Mm-hmm. That, hey, world, you've been reconciled to God through Christ Jesus. Therefore, be reconciled.
Yep.
Turn to Him. Like, look at what's available to you. Look at how good this is. And then I get to live my life as evidence of that, so that people see and testify, oh, he not only is speaking about this, like I see it in their life.
Yes.
And in that, to me, that's the greater argument, because that now is an encounter. Mm-hmm. That people get to encounter Jesus whenever they encounter me. Right. People get to encounter the gospel of the kingdom when they encounter our lives. Right. And that to me is a more powerful tool in exalting Jesus than just trying to argue Him to someone. Right. And that's not to say that, you won't get into conversation where people have questions that you can answer or you can rebut points. And that, that to me is that's a discussion, not an argument. Right. Right. Like, yes. I'll be happy to share with you my thoughts in this and my experience in this. And, in that we were talking about the experience or the encounter perspective, right? Like how there's this, sometimes what that pendulum ends up getting shifted into is like the mountaintop moment with Jesus, and people searching, essentially, for lack of a better term, the high. I need the high of God, to get me through life. Yeah. And when you experience God, things happen emotionally. They do. Like that He created them. He created. There's an emotional response that does happen. For some, they cry. For some, they laugh. For some, they can't speak. For some, they shout out. Like there are different, emotive responses that take place whenever you encounter God and His presence and His, forgiveness and His love and all those kinds of things. But sometimes what ends up happening is like you chase that feeling and that encounter. So then encounter gets a bad name. Right. Because it's like, okay, where's your substance? Sure. So now you've got to have the apologetics to to accompany the encounter, that you have. And I agree with that. I think that if you only are thinking in terms of the emotional mountaintop high, what happens when you're in the valley? Mm-hmm. Oh, I've lost my faith. I've walked away. I haven't paired the substantive nature of the Word of God with the experience of the person of Jesus.
So I would say yes. And I was thinking about the encounter side as well, because we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and how, Christians can search for the highs of conferences or camps and
or the altar.
Or the altar. Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with, yes, the argument stuff or, the where you stand can be the sustenance, but also those encounters can also be sustenance. You and I were talking about yesterday. I was walking through some imposter syndrome things, and I was thinking about today and what we're going to talk about. And I remember this mountaintop moment at church camp probably 20 years ago, and they did a prophetic thing after one night, and your mom was there. I don't remember who said it, but the first thing they said, there's something on this boy. So for someone who was dealing with, has God even really called me to this?
Yeah.
That mountaintop moment was sustenance to my soul, because God was speaking to even a 7-year-old or whoever, whatever age it was, doesn't matter. Because so these encounter moments, if we're just seeking for the emotional high, they can be just, it's not fluff. You're still experiencing the Lord.
Right.
But are you searching for him, or are you searching for a high? And I think maybe that's the difference.
Yeah. It was, it's like the encounter moment can be an equivalent or equate to your wedding day.
A memorial.
Right? It's a memorial moment. It's a day that is marked and etched into your mind, into your heart, into your soul, right? But then from that point, you get to live married.
Yeah.
Right? And in relationship with one another. And so if you are only chasing the wedding day moments, then you're going to miss the everyday relating,
right?
The everyday marriage and the choosing to wake up every morning and say, I do, because as we're, as a married person, that's what we get to choose every morning when we wake up to our spouse. We get to choose every moment to wake up and say, I do to you.
Yeah.
And when we stop doing that, then all of a sudden we find ourselves drifting, and it's like, wow, I'm in a valley. God, I'm in a valley. Where are you? And he's like, I'm here with
right here
the whole time, man. And so being mindful of that when you fall in love with the experience of the encounter, but forget the person. Right. And when you live from a relationship with the person, then the experience is just something that is marked in you. So the moments where you feel, low or feel as if you're questioning and whatnot, that he can bring back that to your remembrance and remind you, hey, no, this is what we have committed to. This is who you are. This is real. This is your testimony, right? So that way you have, when you have arguments that would come in and would try to convince you of something otherwise, you can look back to the encounter and say, no, that's not true. This is who I am. This is what he has done in my life. This is who he is in me. And I'm going to choose to remember and to abide by that and to overcome in that.
Totally. Yep. It's like God almost created it like this, he's created both the need for experiences, because think about, you're talking about relationships wise. Yes, we're married, and how, you have the day-to-day relations, but then also if you don't go on a date night for a while, you can kind of almost feel that tension. It's like, I don't know, there's just some needs that we have that maybe I can't even really explain verbally, but without those date nights or those encounters, those things just keep us fresh, I guess.
Yeah.
And renewed, and he's created both. So let's not pitch one in pursuit of the other.
Right.
Because they're really one. We're pursuing Jesus in all of this.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, just from a simple perspective of like with people, I could tell you all about how great of a person that Taylor is. I can try to argue with you everything that I know about him. And you might have had an experience in the past, either with him or with someone else who knew him.
Sure.
And your all's perspectives could differ based on their experience with Taylor.
My mood,
based on Taylor's mood in that moment. But the truth of it is that I could argue with you Taylor's character, his nature, and how awesome it is to be his friend till the cows come home. But ultimately, you don't get to live from my experience of Taylor.
No.
You get the chance and opportunity to live from your own experience with him. And
Right.
if I can begin to see myself as one who my job is to put your hand with Taylor's hand,
That's right.
to connect you guys so that you all can have relationship,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not going to be worried about when someone is concerned about, someone else's experience with Taylor, because I have my own experience with him. You're not going to argue with me otherwise. I know you well because we've spent time together,
Right.
intimate time together, that I know your heart.
Yeah.
And I know, and so as I'm getting to then represent that and share that to someone who has not gotten to see that,
Right.
then no one else is going to be able to argue that away from me because I've experienced that.
Sure.
And so I want to then put them in your hand so that they can experience the same thing, get to know you in the same kind of a way, and not have you argued away.
Right.
And so, and if we can adopt that kind of a mentality when it comes to Christ,
Right.
that I'm not going to allow, anyone else's opinion of him to shape my experience with him.
Come on.
Because I'm pursuing his heart in this. And when I say pursuing his heart, I'm not talking about like, the pursuit of like I'm chasing after it,
Sure.
like he's running away from me and I got to go chase him,
Yeah.
right? When I'm talking about pursuit, I'm talking about intentional time spent together, like what you were saying with dates,
Mm-hmm.
right? When we talk about pursuing God, we're talking about laying down our agenda and saying, Lord, I'm intentionally setting apart time to be with you.
Yep.
To discover you, to discover who you are, to discover who I am in you, to
Right.
listen to what you have to say, to learn more about you, and to go on a date with you.
Yep.
That's what we talk about when we're talking about pursuit. And so, as I am taking that time to pursue the Lord, then I'm getting to know his heart
Right.
more and more and more and more. And so
Right.
you can't argue that away from me because I've encountered it.
Right.
I've experienced that. And my goal then now is to say, hey, I want you to encounter him too.
Yes.
And you get to encounter him through me.
Yep.
Because if you look at scripture, Jesus, he's talking to these people and he's like, you guys did so well with me. You fed me, you clothed me, you visited me in prison. And they're just like, looking at him all confused, like, what are you, Jesus, what are you talking? When did we do this? And he said, when you did it to the least of these.
That's right.
So he's identifying with those in those kind of scenarios.
Yep.
Paul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He's like, I'm not persecuting you. I'm persecuting the Christians.
That's
He's
right.
identifying with these people, right? He identifies with us.
Yep.
And this, so that every time that I go and I live as Jesus, then you get to encounter him through me.
That's right.
I get to
Yeah.
be the face to the faith, right?
Yeah.
Like to
Yep.
the person, and you get to see him whenever you see me.
That's right.
And so in that, like, maybe that's the question that we can kind of shift into dessert here
Mhm.
is, when people are encountering you in life, are they encountering the argument, or are they actually having an encounter? Are they encountering the the argument of apologist, or are they encountering the person of Jesus?
Right. I think of too, whenever I encounter the argument, there's almost like a sterileness to the air. And it's like, where is Jesus in this?
Yeah.
So I was praying about this kind of, not this kind of thing, but I was just reading through 1 John, and we were talking about this transformation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That when I'm beholding Jesus, I'm becoming like him.
Yep.
And I literally get to be a face to the name.
Yes.
I get to be a face to the name of
Yeah.
Jesus. I
Yep.
get to represent what he's done in my life.
Yeah.
The grace that he's given to me, I get to give because I freely received it.
Yeah.
Now I get to give it. And it's this beautiful exchange from, because we're talking about how argumentativeness is worldly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I exchanged that.
Yeah.
I exchanged argumenting. I exchanged that for something that's way more life-giving.
Yeah.
And now my life will testify.
Yeah.
I guess that would be the exchange.
Yeah.
I'm exchanging from arguing to testifying of what the
Yes.
Lord has done.
Yep. And and that's, for some, they may think like how arrogant it must seem to think that like they can see Jesus in you. Like Jesus is Jesus, and he is he in, and you are a lowly person, yet he says that he was the light of the world, and then he says, and you're the light of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So now you shine me.
Yeah.
We shine him in this, that we are Christians. We're the little Christs. We are to look like him. And he says,
Yes.
as he is, so are we
Yeah.
here in this world, like right now.
Right.
And so this is where we get to look like him, which is why it's important to live a holy life and to be this way. And because as I'm beholding him, he's changing what I look like.
That's right.
Inside and out.
Yeah.
And so that he says, remove the peg out of your own eye before you remove the speck out of your brother.
Yeah.
So if the peg's removed, you have opportunity now to help remove the speck out of your brother. Why? Because you love them and you don't want them to walk with, blinded.
No.
Right. So allow him to come in and transform your life. That's not I can't say anything to anyone, kind of a thing. Let's make sure that you allow me to come take care of your life so that you can help to take care of other people's lives. Just like on an airplane, they say, put your mask on before you help someone else with it.
That's right.
Let's make sure that you can breathe, that you are looking this way so that you are accurately representing me to everyone else. Yeah. And so they can see how good he is.
It's so much more fun this way.
It's way more fun this way.
And that's kind of the whole beautiful thing about the gospel too, is that for one, God came and dwelt among men in a jar of clay, and Jesus did that. So now it's not such a far reach for us to believe that the very same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead now lives in me.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
That's good. So hopefully you have something to take away today.
Yep.
Consider being an encounter versus an argument. Are you an encounter or an argument? Mm-hmm. And if you want to be an encounter, ask him. Say, Jesus, I want people to encounter you as they're encountering me.
Yep.
When I come around, I want them to be like, man, there's something different about that person.
Yep.
Like I want to be around that looks different. And don't let anyone argue away your encounter.
No.
Or make an argument of him.
No.
He's bigger and more worthy than that.
All the time.
Thank you for joining us at the table.
You always have a seat here.